2026 special meeting of the Board of Directors with the Finance Committee. Tonight, we will learn about the development of the 2027 budget. Members of the community will hear from the CFO, the acting CEO, the chair of the Finance Committee, and members of the Board of Directors. Decisions regarding the budget will not be made this evening. Instead, the Board and Fiscal Committee will share ideas with staff related to development of the 2027 budget, and staff will provide their insights related to the process and drivers of the budget. As a reminder, member suggestions are due on June 1st and will be deliberated by the Board of Directors at their meeting on June 11th. You can enter those suggestions at reston.org. Thanks very much. And just a moment.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda minus item D, consent calendar.
Is there?
Minus what?
Item D, the consent calendar.
There's nothing on the consent calendar. Is there a second? She moved. Okay. Made and seconded. All in favor? Directors Lanza, Santa, and Cannon?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Wonderful. It's unanimous.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent for the board to convene as a committee of the whole.
Can we do that after we've done member comments?
That's fine.
Okay, cool. So if we can just hold off for that motion. Brittany, can we move to member comments, please?
Sure. We have Lisa Turkletab, who would like to make a member comment.
Thank you. As I'll talk more this evening about, I think at the Finance Committee level, we've been talking a lot about capital over the last couple of months. And so I thought I would come.
You have to give your address.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2508 Pinocchio Lane. So I thought I'd come to this meeting, this joint meeting, and just really talk as a member on how I feel about capital, because some of these comments are just not appropriate for a Finance Committee board meeting. When we pay our assessments for capital funds, we expect that money to go towards meaningful capital improvements, not to be used as an offset to operating costs to artificially lower the assessment. We are deferring our future for short-term Band-Aid. The reality is our assets are 60 years old and desperately lack modernization. Our tot lots, playgrounds, pools, bath houses simply fall short of meeting the needs of people living in the year 2026. Look at our bath houses. They are outdated, frankly, unusable and gross. At Glade Pool, the changing area is open space right in the middle of the walkway. Today's modern families expect a basic level of privacy, and they aren't getting it. People aren't avoiding our pools because they don't want to swim. They're avoiding it because we aren't providing a competitive product. Look at how overcrowded pools like Lifetime Fitness are. The demand is there, but our current model of trying to make every small pool everything to everyone means they provide limited utility to anyone. So how do we solve this? If we look at it, we can think about it in terms of like a strategic financial model or strategic financial target. For example, if we really wanted to make change, we'd set a target at, hey, a target could look like at 3 pools, we want to triple the swipes over the next 3 years. That's a strategic target. Then we would create user profiles for how would we meet those targets? Who are the key users that we want to target tripling those swipes with? Is it young families? Is it stay-at-home moms? Is it athletic swimmers? Is it retirees? And we would create an assessment about what those different groups actually need in a product that we are providing them. And then we would build the product. That's what strategic operating finances look like, is looking at the users, meeting their needs, looking at the products that we're providing and how to make them more competitive. This gives us a strategic vision to build a real capital plan around, rather than just chasing repairs and maintenance, which is what the current plan is. The current plan that we talk about every year is really just about repair and replace and not really modernize to what people, providing a product to what people want in the year 2026. Additionally, I think we must drag the organization's administration services into the 2020s. Managing DRB through email is inefficient. We need modern technology-based toolkit to handle the entire workflow from application to signature to approvers. Like that's basic, what a community or a community association would provide. Using email is a 1990s technology, not a year 2026 technology. We have the funds. We talk about how much funds we have. We talk about what to do with excess funds. So these are just some ideas on how to stay within the framework of not adding new assets, not drastically changing the community, but actually using the money that we already have to invest back in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any others? Brittany, anyone else signed up or online?
Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Raquel Melanix. Hi, can you hear me? Thanks. Hi, my name is Raquel Melanix. Oh, that's too close now, isn't it? Okay. I just decided to come here at the last minute. My address is actually on file, so I prefer not to say it out loud. And, I basically decided to come because I was just having a conversation with my 14-year-old daughter. I took her and her best friend to the Leesburg outlets today, and they were talking in the back seat about one of my favorite activities, pickleball. So, of course, I was trying to play cool and not join in, but then, of course, I had to. And I said, hey, what did you say about pickleball? And they told me that they were discussing how they wish they could play it, that her friend was introduced to pickleball by her grandmother, and so she loves playing with her grandmother. My daughter was introduced by me and other friends of mine, and they said, we wish we had a place where we could go and just walk and play pickleball. And I said, funny enough, because it's a subject that I want to bring up, and hearing your insight, this is something I want to share. And in fact, I gave her the option to skip swim practice tonight so she could come here and speak on her own behalf. But she's a bit shy and not comfortable speaking in front of groups. So even though I tried to bribe her, I could not get her here tonight. However, I will say that I know there's been some talk about pickleball. Like a couple of years ago, I was really enthusiastic hearing kind of the buzz and what was going to be happening, and that Reston was looking to expand pickleball, possibly even bring some to the south side of town. And 2 years later, nothing has happened. And I really think this is something that the Reston Association should revisit. I was the leader of a pickleball group with 50 plus members, and we were going strong for like a year and a half or two. And then as pickleball continued to grow, our group, we actually ended up breaking up and moving in different directions because there were so many times when we would go to the courts at Autumnwood and they were absolutely packed. And we could not get a court, or there were times when we were kicked off our court because people showed up to play tennis. And we learned in real time that tennis players get to kick you off the court and have it and play for 2 hours, and no one interrupts them, and they don't have to put their rackets out or take turns or alternate. So, I'm here to bring this up because it is something that a lot of us are buzzing about. Again, I mentioned that my group disbanded. I go to Annandale to play twice a week, and I play there on Sundays and Wednesdays, because I know I'm guaranteed a court when I go to Annandale. I'm not guaranteed a court when I show up here at Autumnwood. And I am starting to play on Tuesdays in Tyson's at a public court because I know I can go there and get a court. And I can't get one in my own town where we're paying a pretty good amount per year for these facilities, but yet you all have consistently poured more into tennis in terms of redoing the Glade courts, redoing Lake Newport, and pickleball, which is the fastest growing sport in America, has been ignored. And then on top of that, just want to add that, us pickleball players say to tennis players, hey, hi there, it's nice to meet you, future pickleball player, because that's what they'll eventually become. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate your question today during the Q&A.
yes.
Thank you very much. Oh, no, I just wanted to thank you for your question earlier
Oh, no,
when I
yeah.
did my Q&A. So
Yeah,
thanks.
okay, yeah, you're welcome. And, you know, I would have, I didn't want to bring up my daughter at that time because I wanted her to come here. So I was still working on her, trying to reel her in to plead her case, because I think that if you all maybe hear from the younger generation, that maybe that would make a bit of an impact. And just to add, Montgomery County, like I grew up in Montgomery County, so I have a lot of friends there. And one of my friends has high school students, and her sons have been playing on the pickleball team. So just so you know, like, pickleball is the future. It's growing. They're now developing teams in Montgomery County. And so, you know, kind of like the toothpaste is out of the tube. And so, you know, it's time to jump on board and make this a bigger priority here in Reston.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Mr. President, if I could encourage Ms. Mullinex to take a look at our community survey and the response we got from the membership regarding pickleball in that community survey. And I'd also encourage you to take a look at the locating standards that the board adopted to try and locate pickleball courts. And I think that would answer many of the questions that were posed this evening.
Are you stating what those standards are?
I can't quote them, but they've been adopted. Our acting CEO is COO, did a lot of research on what the standards are for location because of the conflict between residential housing near courts and the sound emanating from the court. So it wasn't a matter of dropping the ball or ignoring something. Our staff.
It's my understanding that at like 150
No,
feet.
I'm not. No, sir. I don't want the implication being made by any comment that the board dropped the ball. We did the research.
I understand that, but I think we've had the conversation.
I'm going to finish my remarks, Mr. President.
I don't
We
think
have looked at.
I'm sorry, Mr. Director Farrell.
We have looked at the
Director
question.
Farrell, you're out of line.
No, I'm not.
You absolutely are, and I'm going to
No,
ask you to
sir.
stop.
No, sir. The question is, have we looked
We
at
are
the issue?
done.
And the answer is we have.
Oh, and you've answered that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next section, please.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the budget kickoff for the 2027 budget. We have lots of great information tonight that I know everyone memorized and read before the meeting, so we're going to try to get ourselves moving here tonight. You're going to hear a little bit from me as the acting CEO. You're going to hear from Mr. Vroom, our Chief Financial Officer, and Mr. Kerr, the Chair of the Finance Committee, is also going to make some comments this evening. So what I thought I would do to get us moving tonight is to discuss a few things that we're considering as we're putting together the 2027 budget. If we could pull up the slides on the screen here. As we look at our approach, we're going to talk about the budget calendar at the end of the meeting, so I'm going to skip that. We're just going to move into our tools and approach for 2027. Every year we come here in May and we talk about what are we considering, why are we considering it, new programs, things of that nature. And I think that we are headed into a really fun year from a budget development perspective because we have lots of different tools and analysis that we haven't had in the past that we've sort of put together over the last few years. So as we're putting together the budget, some of the things that I'm very focused on are the benefits-based fee pyramid that we've introduced last year. We produced our first report using that data and analysis last year. We think we're primed and in a better place to evaluate our services with that this year. Last year, we also put together the first year of a pools analysis report, which tracked how many people were coming to our pools from different zip codes and at different times. This year, we're also trying to track how long people are staying at our pools with a check-out process. We'll see if that's successful or not, but just another data point for us as we're evaluating our usage. Many probably saw in the packet that staff have been working on key performance indicators. I think that this is a great step forward for us as a staff to come to the board each year with metrics that the board is familiar with so that we can accurately articulate why we need funding or maybe why we don't need more funding. And then lastly, our facility condition assessments are just another data point for us in building. We should probably go to the next slide here. Are just another data point in building the CIP. In my role as acting CEO, I really have two focuses. I really like focusing on member service and staff experience. Our staff are probably sick of hearing me talk about member service, but to me, this is what we're here to do. is serve our membership. So as we're looking at building our budget, we're looking at funding things that are of direct service to our membership, and then also making this a great place to, making Reston, a great place to work. And then focusing on efficacy and efficiency. I think as an association, we do a great job of moving forward in the things we do really well, but I think it's time for us to really focus on efficiency. Are the programs we're providing effective? Let's review and discuss it. Is the association operating efficiently? Let's review and discuss it. So there's just a few thoughts there on some of the tools and the things we're going to use as we build the budget for 2027. As we go to the next slide, again, I touched on the fee pyramid. We did a great job, I think, last year of taking a new concept, bringing some great information to the finance committee and the board. But now it's time to go to the next step. The next step is not only did a program recover its costs or did a program meet its revenue target, the next step is this program serving the membership? And if it's not, what is our recommendation? That's really what the purpose of this tool is supposed to be. Like I said, last year was a great pilot year, but we're really moving forward into this year with coming back to the board saying, here's the 742 fees that we charge that are not the assessment. We think some of these can go away. We think some of these programs are no longer effective. On the pool usage, again, I touched on it earlier, but we really are looking at tracking as many items as we can related to use of the pools. We just got our first report back for season 1. We had more swimmers in season 1 in 26 than we had in 25, which is great. But we will come back with a more condensed version of our pools report from last year, again, trying to track how long folks are staying at the pool, not just how many are coming, but where they're coming from, how long they're staying, what is their purpose for visiting, some of the things that Ms. Turkletov was speaking about in her opening comments. Just a few more and we'll move on here. Again, we provided a draft of our key performance indicators for 2026. As a senior leadership team, we've been working together to build these to provide the board and the finance committee with a look inside of how we think we're performing and using those KPIs to then drive our funding or maybe work backwards and say maybe we don't need this funding any longer. So the KPIs were provided in the board packet. I'm not planning on covering them this evening, but I am happy to answer any questions from anyone regarding the how or the why. But I think this is a great step moving forward for us as a team. I will also add, we chose key performance indicators to report to the board. We have many, many others that we're tracking that probably are not board worthy, but we tried to roll them up in a way that made sense to all of our board members. And then if we can just go down, Ms. Kara, to the condition assessments, we can turn this over to Ed. So looking at our condition assessments that were completed last year, we're still continuing to look at this data. We will include projects in the CIP based on what was reported in our condition assessments. This is a really great tool that I think we are using in the correct way. We have a KPI, to go back to the last slide, on how many projects are completed each year from the condition assessments, which I think is a great tool for us. As we look to the future, I think our next round of these is in 2028. We're due for a reserve study in 2029. I think it would be the right decision for us to get condition assessments completed in 28, have those condition assessments inform the reserve study so that we're working from the same sheet of music as we move into the reserve study, but that's a few years down the road from now. So just a peek into how I'm looking at the budget, how Ed and I are working on the budget together. Happy to answer any questions. I believe actually Mr. Kerr is next here, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Dr. Mullenix?
On the condition assessments, I've always thought about it in terms of continuous assessment versus one and done and then revisit several years later. Just for my own, benefit, could you give me some clarity on why the gap, 2 year or more gap?
Sure. So the first feedback came from the team that did them for us. Is it worth the investment to do this every year? That answer was no.
Yeah, maybe to clarify, not to do every single asset every year, but to just have a rolling program where you touch all the assets over a course of 5 years.
So there was minimal funding put in the 2026 budget to catch up this year and do a few more of those. So we will, I believe, Ed, help me out if I'm missing. It might have been tennis courts. We didn't do tennis courts the first time around, so we'll probably get that done this year. But I think if in 2028 we hit all of our assets, we have one new data set that is 3 years newer, and that can inform our reserve study. I think we're in a better place there. Okay. The other thing I'll add just quickly is that, the bridges don't need to be done all the time. We don't really have a large inventory of buildings, so I think doing it again in 28 is the right timing for us.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Joseph?
Are we in the committee of the whole or not? Okay. So this is the first time the board and the finance committee are seeing the key performance indicators.
Right.
Are you looking for feedback on those? Are you looking for the board to bless them or to say, yes, we think these are the ones that we'd want to look at? How would you like to go
So
about
I was
those?
hoping that if anyone had feedback, I would get that feedback individually, maybe after the meeting. I'm happy to do that. Staff are going to use these. This is something that we are doing. If there's other ones that, the board or finance committee would like to recommend, happy to do that as well. But we have sort of built our year and our program around these. So we will report on them, but I'm happy to take any feedback, happy to discuss after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
We are currently not in the committee of the whole. That motion was supposed to be made after member comments.
Correct. I just said that to Director Joseph. Thank you, though. I saw you about to push it.
May I follow the motion to move into committee of the whole?
I think you'll actually have to make the motion because the motion wasn't actually made.
It was actually unanimous consent requested.
Was it?
Yes.
Oh, I see no objections.
Check those online. Just to make things easier for moving forward.
No objection.
Fine by me.
Enjoy.
No objection.
Cool. You want me to turn it over?
If we have to appoint a temporary.
Yes, and I would like to appoint Director Perry as the chair of the committee. I know who I want to.
Excellent.
All right, so I think we're moving on to Mr. Kerr is going to talk a little bit about reserves and the budget kickoff from a finance committee perspective. Mr. Kerr.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I will take you not as quick as Pete, but I'll take you quickly through this since I know everyone's read it. But if there are questions or concerns, or bring them up as we go along, I think is the best way to handle it. I started out with the idea of like this being, so how do you do a budget, okay? And I turned it into a talk about reserves, and I'll explain why. So the first slide is really started out with, well, how do you begin a budget process? There's two important things you have to start with. You have to agree on your goals, and we have strategies, we have goals and objectives. Those ought to be important in every discussion we have about new programs, new services, and that kind of thing. And those are very important things when you start off. The other thing is to reconfirm, I like to say reconfirm, operational and capital reserve positions. I don't think this is something we've ever done, to my knowledge. In fact, Peter reminded me last week that we've probably never talked about reserves. We've never used the word reserves. We've talked about triple RF. We've talked about minimum balance. We've never used the word reserve, and it's really important that we do. So that's where this is going to head. So obviously ensuring that we reflect on the strategic goals is very important. Reserves are an important part of that process. And so I want to get into capital reserves. And I'm not going to bore you with all this stuff because you all know the governing documents better than I do, but it's really laid out fairly strongly in our deed that we should have operating and capital reserves for the organization. And many times these reserves are for contingencies that we haven't incurred yet, but we know they're going to, and we need to plan for them. We need to place these things in reserve accounts or expend them for the general welfare of owners if we have excess. So a lot of places where they talk about having a reserve. Not to mention that even POA says that there should be a statement regarding procedures used for estimation and accumulation of cash reserves. That's kind of what Resolution 3, the old Resolution 3 on capital used to do, but it never did it very well. And then I threw out a slide and just, no two organizations should have the same methodology of doing this. We should have our own. But it is nice to know that everyone does this kind of thing, okay? This isn't something that we dreamed up here, that every organization from federal government, state government, Fairfax County, has reserves. Here's some examples of HOAs and the kind of reserves that they've reported in their annual reports over the last few years. And they're pretty significant compared to what we've been managing. Of course, they also may not collect as well as we do either, but I don't know that. So let's get into some of the, and then there's some third-party kind of, this is professorship giving you an idea of what should HOAs reserves look like. And one rule of thumb they use is 70 to 100% of a fully funded balance. And if I look ahead at the next 5 years of what we're going to spend, okay, if we carried 70 to 100% of that, we carry between $3 and $4.5 million in reserve. Just, again, it's a guideline, okay? And important to remember that depends also on how old your assets are. And if you're an organization with older assets, you need to be toward a certain end of that range. If you talk to reserve study professionals, they'll say that 15 to 40% of your income ought to go to reserves. Now, at $20 million, that would be 3 to 8 million. Now, we aren't a 501c3, okay? So we don't have to raise money. We collect fees. So we're certainly on the lower end of that. We don't need to have 40% of our revenue going. But right now, we've probably got 20% of our revenue going, okay? Which may be a good number, may not, but that's something that just, again, guidelines. Think about where people think these ought to be. And I'll go to the next page. Why does this matter? And there's really, three primary reasons. I won't read every one of these things because they're in three categories. One is we have a fiduciary responsibility to members, okay, to have a strong balance sheet, a strong financial organization. That's important. You need to be prepared for emergencies. We have great insurance at RA, okay? Insurance does not cover everything that happens to our assets. In fact, it probably covers a small portion of what happens to our assets. Most of it's wear and tear, okay? So it's important to be ready for that. Special assessments are an option. Nobody wants that. I think, I'll take a bet, nobody in this room wants that to ever happen. I certainly don't want it to happen. Loans are always on the table. And Finance Committee will say to you, we're always willing to talk about it. No one is against that concept, but it adds costs. And there's things you got to worry about and think about when you do that, but it's always on the table. But a well-planned reserve can help get you through those kinds of times without having to do either one of those things. The third is probably the most important thing of all, and that's property values. Whether we know it or not, having a strong financial HOA matters to people who are selling their house and the people who they want to buy their house. And anybody who's looking at coming to this community knows you're an HOA is going to look up the financial aspects of the HOA before they place an offer on that house. It's the way things work. We won't talk about Freddie Mac's blacklist, okay? There is one that says if you're not doing a good job, you won't get a loan. So I just want to go to the next slide, quick slide on asset aging, because this is something that is important to us, okay? And it's hard to put your finger on the exact age of everything we have, but one very general metric is just taking the depreciation over your fixed assets. And that's a very common ratio in many organizations. This is our history, very simplified. We got up to 75%. By the way, the higher the number, the older your assets, okay? So a few years ago, we were 75% of our assets were depreciated, okay? We've gotten that down to 68%. That's a great sign. That's a good direction. But to give you an idea, 40 to 50% would be something that someone would say your assets are getting older. And just the chart on the right just explains one of the reasons why, and that is that half the assets we have to maintain are pools. and we know that they're older. Fortunately, we do a good job of maintaining them, but they're still older, and we got to think about that and be ready for that. So if I go to the next page, we've talked about in rewriting Resolution 3 about having a reserve range. And this is really something that, again, would be new, not a minimum balance, but a reserve range, okay, to work in. And it gives us two things, okay, to do. It gives us the flexibility to manage projects and unknown variances without impacting members, meaning things are going to go up and down, but we don't have to, every time they go up, we don't have to charge the member. Every time they go down, we don't have to give a reduction to the members. We can keep it fairly steady. And just to give you an idea, the chart on the left at the bottom there are a lot of other funding things that go on in RA. The two biggest ones are market gain or loss on our investments and closed project variances. Many of them are positive, which means we're adding funds to our accounts without any further funding. And those things can go up and down, as you can see in this, okay? And we got to be able to handle that. So on the right is just what our capital funds would look like if we had a range, a minimum and a maximum. If we keep it within the range, we can keep a flat funding to the members without having to worry about every year, do we have to worry about where the market's going to be or anything else? So we think that range is going to be an important thing. And having a ceiling too, we never had a ceiling before we had a minimum balance. And by the way, minimum balance, those terms should go away. These aren't funds that you never touch, okay? They're simply a guideline, okay? And if you have to use some, you do. And you have a way to get back to where you ought to be. But there's never a don't touch this kind of attitude, which I think some people have believed is the case, and just not the way we want to operate, okay? So my last slide is getting back to the very first slide, confirming or reconfirming reserve positions. So this is a chart of both the operating cash side of things and the capital side of things. When you look at the balance sheet, I'm sure everyone in this room loves to look at balance sheets, okay? At least, well, 3 or 4 people do. But when you look at cash that we have and you see, why have you got $9 million of operating cash? Well, because 75% of it is already sold on something, okay? It's either stream mitigation funds we can't touch, it's CAT funds we can't touch, it's deferred for some reason, and so you have to be aware of that. So we look at what's unrestricted, okay? And right now, unrestricted is down to just about a month's worth of our expenses, which is pretty low, pretty good, but getting low. And we need to look at the same side with capital. Start looking at, by the way, just we only ever looked at one capital number as far as RRF goes. We have carryover of projects every year. You don't ever finish every project every year, okay? Those projects are funded. Those projects aren't part of the reserve. They need to get done, and they have funds to do them. So really, it's the blue bar on here that is the reserve. The orange at the top is carry forward from the last year that are committed to programs you must finish, okay? So when we see $7 million of capital, that's not $7 million of money floating around waiting to be spent. Much of it, we used to carry over $2 to $2.5 million every year. Not unusual. I think we've gotten much tighter lately. 25 was an exception, but it was an exception year. We know why things happen in 25. But we've gotten much better at finishing projects each year. So again, keeping track of that stuff is important, but understanding that reserves in both operating and capital are very important just to maintain our financial stability and what we owe to the members. So I wanted to make sure that folks saw some of that and heard some of that tonight. And maybe we'll talk more about it as the night goes on, but it's important stuff and we'll pay attention to during the rest of this budget season. Thanks. I guess
Great, thank you, Mr.
no
Kerr.
questions. It was.
On to me now.
Well, I
think.
actually had a question,
Oh.
but you answered it, so. I know, you did great.
Okay, a few more slides coming up here. We're moving on to the operating budget next. And while she's bringing it up, my first slide kind of tries to remind everybody that the assessment is really a calculated number. You know, we kind of always, when we look at the budget, that's kind of the first thing that people tend to look at is the assessment. But just wanted to remind folks that that's really the last part of the process. I mean, we're really going to develop our budget with the operating expenses, decide what we're going to contribute to capital, figure out what our non-assessment revenues are going to be, and then you kind of calculate the assessment, which she's getting to. Next slide, please. There we go. So, you know, it isn't a calculated number where you basically have your assessment revenue and your non-assessment revenue needs to equal the operating expenses and the contribution to capital. So once we budget for the non-assessment revenue, operating expenses, and capital contribution, that determines how much assessment revenue we need, which basically equals the operating expense plus the capital contribution minus the non-assessment revenue. And then we basically calculate the assessment by taking the assessment revenue that we need and dividing it by the number of equivalent units, which, as a reminder, you know, we have a slightly smaller number of equivalent units than actual RA residents because there's some folks that get a discount if their property value is below $178,000, which we do have some that are less than that, or if they're on Fairfax County tax relief, which is available to seniors and disabled folks who are below certain income and financial asset level. So that brings down the number of units a little bit lower to our number of equivalent units. And to use 2026's budget as an example, you know, we had a little over 19 million of assessment revenue, 4.8 million and change of non-assessment revenue, which equals the 21 million and change of operating expense. Plus, we did a capital contribution of 2,850,000 for this year. Or another way to look at it is the operating expense plus the capital contribution minus the non-assessment revenue equals the assessment revenue we needed, divided by the 21,500 equivalent units. That's what gave us that $890 assessment number. So just sort of a reminder of how that process works, and then we kind of figure out all those other aspects of the budget first, and that will calculate what the assessment is. And kind of like Dave said, if there are any questions, please stop me as we go. And then on the next slide, so this is what we're kind of calling our draft zero budget. And I think Mr. Kerr came up with that term first. But as a reminder, we're in the second year of the biennial budget. So we already have a draft budget for 27 to start with, because last year we did not only the budget for 26, but also for 27. So that's sort of our draft zero budget, which was an assessment of $937. I'll show some more details on the next slide. And that's sort of a starting point. And we had some assumptions that were built into that, which I'll cover on later slides. And just a little assessment history on the right there. And a reminder, you know, we've talked about this in the past, but our assessment has increased 2.9% on average over the last, 12 years, I guess we're showing there. So it's generally in line with inflation. We'll go to the next slide. So this is kind of that, it's usually a long form, but I have it broken into 3 parts here just for presentation purposes. But we have, kind of the assessment revenue at the top left there, and then all the different cost centers or departments and how much they had in the budget. And this is the 2027, again, draft zero budget that was approved last year. So we have the operating expenses there, or I'm
Ed.
sorry, those are the revenues.
Ed, if you
Yes.
don't mind, we have a question over here for you.
Yes, Lisa. Sorry.
I just have a question about the format of this meeting, are we gonna go through all the slides or have discussion?
Well, as I said, please speak up anytime and ask questions, or if you want to add other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the expectation is.
I mean, I'll do it kind of
Or-
slide by
yeah.
slide as I go, and then when I finish my section, I'll ask if there are any more broader questions. I'm going to kind of go through operating, and then Pete's going to hit capital in the next section.
Lisa, when we go into committee of the whole, the conversation is a bit more free form. So as they speak and give presentations, feel free to interject as they go through.
Okay, because I would like to discuss like some strategy around draft zero. I don't know if this is the place to have a conversation on that, where we can engage with the board on that, or should we wait till you're done with your presentation? I want to be respectful of that, but I also want to have some conversation.
I guess I'd suggest kind of let me go through these slides, and it may hit, like, there's going to be an aquatics section coming up, and there's some other factors to consider for the operating budget. So maybe I'll hit some of the things, and that'll be a good time for you to speak up. But if I don't hit them at all, then when I kind of get to my last slide, we can talk about anything else that anyone wants to.
And I would generally say, you know, for our members that are watching, they appreciate, even though they can also see the slides and all the things, a lot of our members do appreciate when we have at least an overview for those that don't choose to dig in deep.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I guess I'll continue, but interrupt if you wanted to say something. But this has the revenues and expenses by cost center, and over to the right, at the top right, the net contribution to capital that we had for the 27 budget in our draft zero budget again was $3,150,000. And we had some offsets built into there, and that did equate to an assessment of 937, which is a 5.2% increase over the 26 assessment. And at the bottom left there are the assumptions, and I did want to hit those. So the assumptions were that there's no change to the number of equivalent units. I mean, we've been trying to work to get new members in, you know, maybe we'll be able to pull in a few, but for now, there was no change assumed as of yet. The non-assessment revenue, we increased at 3% per year with two exceptions. I bumped it down $50K for finance because an assumption that interest rates would decline, and that would potentially bring down the interest income, although rates haven't been come down as much as, you know, we might have thought. So we'll see how that goes. And if you recall, last year, late in the budget process, there was some money added to the 26 budget to come from the Friends of Reston, but also an assumption of some coming in the 27 budget. And we increased operating expenses by 4% per year. And then at the very bottom left, I did want to highlight that, you know, we've talked about the reserves, and we'll be talking about reserves more, not only today, but also in the coming meetings. But just a reminder that in the 27 budget, the draft zero budget anyway, we have over 4.5 million of capital spend built into that budget, and Lake Newport Tennis is a big driver of that. That's 1.6 million. But it's a heavy spend year, and we only have assumed 3.15 million of capital contribution. So, you know, about 1.4 million less than the spend for the capital contribution. And that was because the spend is pretty high next year because of Lake Newport Tennis, and also because, you know, we're kind of feathering in, working towards that 3.75 million flat funding model is what we talked about last year. So, you know, it is a strategy, but just realize that we already have built into the draft budget a $1.4 million less of capital contribution than our projected spend. So just wanted to highlight that. Any questions on that slide? And then, you know, starting last year, we've been trying to forecast a budget going out in the future, out to 5 years. So this is what that would look like with a 5-year forecast. And the assumptions there on the top right, again, no change to the equivalent units was assumed, non-assessment revenue 3% a year, and operating expenses 4% a year. And basically the triple RF and CARF and offsets from what we had in the 10-year CIP that we did last year. And the capital contribution working up to 3.75 million after the feathering in or kind of ramping up to that. And what we've been working on more recently is what we call the capital reserve forecast there at the kind of bottom left. And at the end of 2025, we had a capital reserve of just over 5 million. At the end of 2026, we're projecting that to be just slightly lower. And then in 27, you can see it drops by over 1 million. And again, that's because the contribution to capital is lower than what we're spending. And then it stays relatively steady in 28, 29, and 30, but always in that kind of $3.75 to $4 million range. And one assumption that's there is what we're calling the favorable variance assumption. and I've assumed 300,000 a year of positive favorable variance, and that would come from investment earnings, which, we do have some money invested, and we hopefully will continue to make earnings. Most years, on average, we will, but, there may be some years that's going down. And then we also can get favorable variances from canceled projects or project variances where projects come in under budget. So, we don't know how that'll turn out. 2025 was a good year for the market in particular, so we had 685K of favorable variance, but the assumption was 300K there. And that's kind of the capital reserve forecast that we have at this time. Any questions on that? Okay, moving to the next one. So I have a few slides here on 2025 budget performance, but I'm going to hit them really quickly unless anyone has questions, because you have seen this before. We went over it in March. We kind of went over the 2025 end-of-year results, but we thought it was sort of beneficial in the context of the budget, not just thinking about the 25 actuals, which is what we talked about in March, but as we think about the budget, just a reminder that over the last 2 years, we've finished the year very close to the budget. Last year, we had a 62K deficit where our operating margin was slightly less than was forecasted or projected in the budget. And the prior year, in 2024, we had 123K surplus. So a total of a 61K surplus over the last 2 years, which, is virtually nothing against a $23 million budget. And you can see all the variances are relatively small against the budget there. So that was the main point to highlight.
Can I just make one comment there?
Yes, sure.
Because it just says that, there are offset overruns for legal, outside, professional service, and utilities.
Uh-huh.
And I just want to make a point that there was a decision made by the board, because we knew we were going to end the year positively, that we chose to spend some money because we knew we would have it, especially on things like the condition assessments. We spent an extra $100,000. And so I don't want the members to think that those overruns were not planned, because we did make a decision to spend that money. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good point. And just to highlight one thing is we actually did come in slightly under budget for expenses by 23,000, but we were down a little more than that for revenue. And then going to the next slide is just more details on revenues, but again, I'm really not going to hit that in detail. But we had various things, a few things that came in below budget, like transfer fees and credit card fees, but we had things that came in above budget, like interest income. So ended up, a little bit under for the year for revenue, but pretty close to the budget. And expenses, looking at them by department, we had some departments that basically got impacted because we assume a certain number of staffing vacancies, and if we don't have those vacancies, they're going to come in a little bit above budget. We had some savings from the seasonals in aquatics in particular, because we had more weather-related pool closures last year. We kind of factor in a little bit of an assumption for that, but we had more bad weather last year. And, we had some other things here and there, but again, finished just slightly under budget by 23K against, 20 million and change budget. So very tiny variance there. And looking at it by function, the people cost came in a little bit below budget, 74K, and the other was slightly above budget, 51K. But, very slight, underrun on expenses last year. So, unless there's further questions or comments, I didn't plan to, spend much time on that, but it was mostly a reminder that we've been, very close to budget the last 2 years. And as Director Juszczyk pointed out, part of that is on purpose by, the board and staff and finance committee. We've all worked together because we've known that we've had certain things that we were going to run high on. If you remember back to 24, we had unbudgeted advocacy costs, and aquatics ran quite hot in 24, but we kind of, held off on filling some vacancies and, took some actions to make sure we ended up close to budget. So it wasn't by accident that we ended up very close to budget the last 2 years, but we did. And that was it on that topic, unless there are other questions. All right, and then moving to aquatics. When we start talking about the budget, aquatics is always a big driver. We'll be looking at pool hours again, like we've done every year, and we want to get
A couple more.
We'll get there. So in 2025, you may recall we added some hours for pool hours. At the request of the board, we had various meetings and discussed that and added some into the budget for 2025 to support some additional pool hours for specific things, extended by 1 week in season 3, et cetera. And then in 26, we actually reduced pool hours some, and that was based on metrics. I mean, we didn't just randomly decide to reduce pool hours. It was looking at data where we weren't getting good attendance, and, it was a, methodical process, but we reduced some pool hours in 26 to, try and help the budget, but also using data to support those decisions. And
So,
that-
Ed, if you don't mind, I'd just like to chime in. Those reduction to the pool hours, there were at least a few of us who felt that we had not given that enough time to have sufficient data. We didn't feel that 1 year was sufficient data to make those changes. So while I appreciate you are pointing out that data was used, I just want to be clear, it was 1 year's.
Right.
And I would love to see on any survey going forward, a question where we ask, were you aware there were extended pool hours in 2025? Because I think had we given it another year, we would have seen significant action by our members who went, wow, this was here last year, I didn't know, let me use it this year.
Right.
So I just, I think that it's important to know, yes, there was data, but it was literally 1 season.
Oh, good point. And as I recall, I think you might have made that point last year when we did that vote, and not all board members voted in favor of that. I believe you and maybe Mr. Farrell did not, but the majority of the board voted to, do that. So, but yeah, Lisa.
That we were rained out the entire month of June. So I don't know if these are weather adjusted, like those were the hours we were supposed to be open, or the hours that we actually were open and the pools were usable. But we were rained out the entire month of June. Like there was not a weekend that we were not rained out. And so I just want to bring that up because on the next slide where you talk about attendance, I really wish we would have used the 2024 June numbers. Because it would probably, that attendance number, if you assume June was 2024 usage because of weather, you probably would be back into the 130s maybe. I don't know. But June is a heavy pool usage month, I think, June and July, and then we start fading out as we get into cooler weather in August. Anyways.
Well, and of course, we've had a great kickoff to the season so far.
Gosh.
And the next slide does show some metrics anyway.
Yeah. But
If we bring that up, it shows that, in 24, 25, 26, how many open hours there were. So, from 24 to 25, a pretty big jump, a little over 8,000 to, almost 9,700. And we dropped that a little bit in 2026, but not too much. And then you can see the funding amounts for the aquatics budget and, the big question mark for 26. We'll see what attendance was. And to Lisa's point, in 2025, attendance was down, but, that may be weather related more than anything else. I don't know, Pete, do you have any comments on it?
Only that should say funded hours. So if it said funded hours, I think, Lisa, that would track with the question that you're asking.
Right,
So it is not the number of hours that we were open, it's what we were funded to be open for.
Right.
Yes.
It's kind of the planned open hours.
I feel like when we talk about these kind of metrics going into the budget, though, I feel like we need to have like some pro rata or some functionality to it. Like those were funded hours, but we were actually only operating for, because that 116 just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense with all the effort that was put into it. So just some recommendations there.
Well, and I will say that as a board in general, we asked for additional metrics moving forward because we felt that while it was great to know how many people swiped in, we didn't really know, were they staying 15 minutes or were they staying 5 hours? So that is one of the things that we will receive going forward.
That'd be great.
And that second bullet point on this slide, that we're going to optimize operating hours based on facility usage, I know that staff consider this, but obviously you're hearing both committee and board members saying to consider the weather as part of your decision making when you're making a recommendation.
How how much money did we save this weekend? I mean, that's money that's like now thrown back into the budget for consideration. You know what I'm saying? Like we should have saved thousands of dollars this weekend. How much?
I know, Lisa, you're referencing that because we got rained out this weekend.
Yeah.
We saved money on staffing, that's what
Yeah.
you're referencing.
Yeah, 20,000, 30,000, I don't know. It would be interesting to know like that
Sure.
kind of real time, like how much did we save by not, because this was a wash.
All right, let's move on to our 2027 considerations.
All right. So besides aquatics, other operating budget considerations for 2027. So new and discontinued programs is supposed to be part of this process. And one challenge is that, we're still early in the year and we're going to kind of look at how this summer goes before we make some decisions on this. But some of the things we're at least looking at, and nothing major. I mean, I don't think we're really looking at anything major for a new or discontinued program, but Laura's interested in maybe adding a junior adventure camp. We'll be looking at our rental programs like stand-up paddle boards and see how those are performing against the fee pyramid and, if those make sense to continue or make changes. There's a desire to maybe try and push party events a little bit more, like corporate events, tennis, pickleball parties. I think there's revenue opportunities there. And then again, using the benefits-based fee pyramid, we'll provide recommendations as part of the budget process later on, kind of looking at how this summer goes. And then staffing, we are not planning to propose any new FTEs, and we'll be looking at the vacancies and evaluating those to see if we should make any changes there as well. Advocacy, I mean, we're basically funding $60,000 a year right now for advocacy, and we'll collectively, want to decide whether we want to continue that at its current level or, possibly a different level.
And I would say that is really, the staff, I think, are going to need the board's decision on that piece. And we might consider taking a topic at one of our future meetings to make a decision on what direction the board, how we want to define advocacy and how much money we want to put towards it. I would not think that the board is looking for staff to guess,
Right,
based
right. No, we would
on the
definitely
very
be
little
looking for the
evidence
board's
or
input.
input you currently have on that topic.
Just for clarity, that 60,000 is the effort in Richmond to keep a casino out of Reston. Is that the right, where that number comes from?
It's not necessarily just for casino, but that's 95% of what it's for. I mean, that's basically the focus. It's the one company you're familiar with. And then tree maintenance, so, you may recall that we've had savings in our natural areas cost center the last couple of years because we are having a big challenge hiring and retaining arborists. So, we're continuing to look at that and basically, make the trade-off should we have RA staff doing that work or external contracted out. And partly because it's so hard to hire arborists. So we'll be looking at that and proposing something in the budget.
And I just want to remind our members when we're talking about tree maintenance, for all of the trees within RA that sit on RA land, historically we have had three arborists for every tree, for every call of a tree down over a path, of a tree down on property, of a tree, oh my gosh, I promise you there is always someone calling about trees. And there has historically been 3 people. And I believe it's the last 2 years we've had 1, or is it just, yeah.
That's correct.
So I just want to, when we're talking about that as a whole, I want to recognize that this is not just, we get a call twice a year to go out and look at all the trees. I mean, this is an ongoing, constant conversation had at CSF.
On that note, can you give us a little insight as to why it's difficult to hire and retain arborists? I'm sure there are very few arborists, but I guess.
I would actually expand the topic, not just to arborists, but to environmental staff as a whole. So if your chosen career path is natural resources, trees, things of that nature, you're going to find a really great position likely in a municipality. So Fairfax, Arlington, Loudoun, lots of opportunities available. Also, the private sector is very competitive. So from a tree perspective, you get a call today. there's overtime because of bad weather. There's just lots of competition in the area for this. So that's some insight there. It's not necessarily just a money conversation, but if you, for example, go enter Fairfax County as a natural resources, entry level position, there may be 15 promotional opportunities because of the size of the county. If you come here as an arborist, you're going to be an arborist. That's just the nature of our business. We have struggled with this topic in the 3 years that I've worked here. We cannot keep the positions filled. And if we don't try something new, we'll never know if it works or not. So to me, this is an evaluation of how should we measure this? We've had lots of internal conversation about should there be up to a certain level RA handles internally? Because right now we do everything. But maybe there's a certain size of tree that we handle, and above that, it's a contract situation. So we could turn some FTE dollars into contract dollars. That's something we're considering, but we'll come back and have a recommendation for the fall.
And
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, sorry. Just for the benefit of everybody here, when we're talking RA, arborist and trees, we're only talking about the 1,350 acres that we own, which translates into something like 6 million trees, I'm advised. And the clusters are expected to take care of their own trees. So now think about, it's 120 clusters, Mr. Adams? And think about, I'm sorry? 135. Thank you. 135 clusters, and they're all taking care of their trees on their own. They don't look to RA. RA does not provide them with service for regarding trees or when trees fall down or when trees are dying and need to be removed. The other thing to keep very much in mind here is, 65 years ago, this was a farm. And most of the trees that we're looking at today started growing 65 years ago. And most people who know something about trees, much more than I do, will tell you that's about the average age of a tree before it dies. And so we're at a spot, not unlike, as mentioned earlier, with our physical facilities, that we're going to see more trees dying and needing to be removed before they fall on somebody's house or somebody's car, as has happened in my cluster over the last 3 years. So, and falling and obstructing our trails. So it's a serious problem that I don't know how you're going to solve it, Mr. Lusk, but I wish you the best.
So I have a follow-up comment on that, or a question maybe for the board. Is there any plan to increase?
Is your
Can you pull the mic
microphone on?
closer?
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Okay.
So is there a plan to increase the number of arborists that we hire and then share with the HOAs and charge some fee?
It's
For
a
the
great
benefit
question.
of the
So
HOAs?
I think two separate answers. So the first answer is, I think what we're talking about is perhaps RA employs less arborists and we spend more resources on contract dollars. I think that's probably the answer number one. We also, every year when we talk to our insurance about our biggest risk, the first thing they ask us is, do you climb trees? And every year we say, sort of, but then they figure out that we actually do. So the first answer is likely not more arborists, but likely more to tree maintenance contract dollars. The second piece of your question about should we share that with clusters is that's a longer answer than I have for you tonight. There have been lots of conversations about how does RA share resources with clusters in the past. There's opportunities for contract sharing, for volume, things of that nature. We've just never quite gotten down that path. I'm sorry, that's not a great answer, but that's the best answer I have for you tonight.
And I would just like to say, I don't disagree with Director Farrell, but we do have members that contact RA about trees, even if they are within clusters, which then at times will bring up having, covenant staff go out to evaluate first, or, it's a large issue. And even if clusters are responsible for their own, that doesn't mean they don't call us. I just want to be very clear about that.
I called RA.
Yeah, it is a thing. So I agree that even if you have, here is your path, that doesn't mean we're not involved somehow in general.
That's right.
Except for Director Farrell's cluster, because he knows what's going on and he's got it under control.
I can walk you out to all of our pins.
All right, if we go to the next slide, the next budget consideration will be inflation. You know, it had been starting to trend down, but, you know, not so clear on that anymore. Gasoline, I mean, we might have to increase the gas budget by 50% next year or something like that. And, you know, electrical has also been going up as well. So, you know, we'll have to do our best to, you know, estimate what we want to assume for inflation on various things for next year. Insurance being one of those, and we will know, you know, next month what our renewal costs are for July of this year through June of next year. So we'll know for the first half of '27 what our insurance costs will be, and, you know, we'll make a projection for the second half. IT and software, we are considering proposing several new software packages, kind of an external facing one that the members would use, and some internal things within HR and comms and covenants. And then our managed services for IT from Red River, that is up for recompete, so that'll be something to consider as well. The new rec survey, following up the 23 one, and that would be done in 28, but the funding for it would start in 27, as I understand it. And then quarterly assessment payments, the board made a motion a couple months ago maybe, and asked staff to bring some analysis, you know, options, recommendations to the board in July to look at potentially quarterly assessment payments or, you know, some other options we might consider as well. And then the good old member budget suggestions, we'll start to review those in June, specifically 11 June. That board meeting will be to go over the budget suggestions. As President Johnson said earlier, those are due the 1st of June. We are going to keep that open longer, but we're trying to get them all in by 1 June. And, you know, we really need them in by then to be able to do a proper analysis of them for the 11 June meeting. As of like late this morning, we were up to 113 suggestions. Last year we had 140 something, so I bet we'll be similar to last year in number. But we'll see how that goes in the next few days, and we'll look at that on the 11th of June. And I guess that was my last slide on the operating budget. So, you know, this would be a good time for anyone who has any other thoughts on the operating budget. We'll be going to capital next, so hold your thoughts on that. But if you have any other questions, comments, thoughts on the operating budget, now would be the time.
So we'll start with Director Juszczyk, and then I believe you have some statements too.
So can we verify, Ed, what you were saying? One, it says new recreation survey. We calling that our member survey? Are they interchangeable? This isn't a different survey, right?
It's the same survey.
Okay.
It should also say, should the board choose
But I
to do it.
want to say something, I thought I read in here that 2027, there would be some funding for that survey.
So that was the original idea. So this came up in the annual plan meeting.
Right.
The original idea was that the survey would be partly funded in 27 and executed in 28. That was the initial plan. So that's what we're saying here.
So you're saying you're keeping that idea or you're punting it to 2028?
We're keeping the idea of doing the survey in 28, funding it over 2 years. That was the idea.
What's the cost of that?
It's about 100,000.
I was around, yeah, I was gonna say it was like just under 100K.
100 for a survey?
Yeah.
70,000.
So I
Well,
will,
that's actually a bargain price.
Well, and I will say, we learned a lot, but also it was, if I recall, and you guys in the back of the room confirm, it was the most answered survey we've ever had that we know of.
Correct.
So we actually got good data from it.
And we get bids on that? It goes out to bid, right?
Yes, it went out to bid. And we had an expert in the field advising us on the bids and on the structure of the survey. And it's the first time we've ever had any kind of valid feedback from our membership. She's gone.
so my comments on that would be, I'd love to see it just in 2028. I think, you know, we worked really closely with PrAC when we were planning it. I think there's a lot of work that we can do internally to decide what the survey is going to encompass, how it's going to look different from a previous one. But I'd like to see it done in first quarter of 2028 and just fund it in 2028. And if our CFO can find a way, capitalize it because it will be used over several years, that would be even cooler.
If I recall,
We want to do it in second and third quarter.
part of
I
the
don't
reason,
think we want to do in second and third quarter.
but I thought part of the reason for funding it starting in 2027 was because there is some groundwork that needs to be laid before the survey can be actually produced. And we produce it in Q2.
Yeah, second and third.
So if you're not even starting the work until Q1, I'm not confident you'll get it off the ground by Q2. And we did it in Q2 so that we would have access to all the people at the pools and tennis courts
Exactly.
and such. So-
April, May, and June, right. If you don't get the results by early summer, then you're not going to use it for 2029's budget. It's just the way that it plays out.
It's not, but it's.
But I
never-
do not think that we need to spend money on it
It
in, in 2027, because a vendor can put a survey instrument together and execute it in less than 6 months. They don't need more than 6 months to do it. Again, just my suggestion.
I would recommend it showing both ways because I think you'll have differences of opinions on the board. Agreed.
And it was never intended to drive budget decisions the year it was taken. It was intended to try and give us some input into more capital expenditures, because that's what we were focused on, was what facilities do you use, what facilities would you like to see? That was the focus of it. So I don't think that we need to see it in order to form the following year's budget. It was more, what's the long-term view?
Okay.
And we got a very, very high response rate,
Yes, we did.
and we want that.
Bob, go ahead, and then if,
I think from my review of the survey and its results, the key questions that it didn't ask was, how much are you willing to pay for improvements?
Yeah.
And that would be a critical aspect, because there are a lot of things I would like to have, but am I willing to pay for them? Probably not.
and then did you want to talk about the zero?
Yeah, so, I think generally speaking, over the years, management presents a draft one budget. But by the end of the budget period, what it really comes down to is there's really an unwillingness, and maybe it's right or wrong. It's not a value decision, but there's really an unwillingness for the assessment to increase of just 10%, right? So I'm wondering, I think having that guidance out early is like, hey, we'd like to see the draft one budget with a target assessment of 5 to 7%, but we'd like to see these new things in here. So we'd like for staff to make recommendations on what they're gonna cut out to kind of get to that target plus or minus. Or maybe you go a little higher this year because inflation supports it higher. I think when we're just like thinking about this strategically, I think more strategic direction, there's an opportunity to have more strategic direction and input into draft one than we've had in the past. Because then we get into a lot of these like very tactical and important conversations very, very late in the budget process, which this is all great conversation in my opinion, but it's also very strategic. It's like, hey, this survey is important. We've decided we're going to do the survey. Do we need to fund it this year? And have that draft one budget actually be more representative of the strategic guidelines of the board. The second thing is you could also, the draft one budget doesn't have to be a single point of view. It could be a range of possibilities. Like the board could take a strategic value and say, we would like the draft one budget to reflect a 5% decrease in the operating budget, either by eliminating, don't touch pool hours, or eliminate other stuff. Like it's a direction, and what it does is it just presents more of a range of outcomes and possibilities and challenges staff to what is reasonable. Just kind of throwing those things out there. Like every company, every department looks at this differently, but by limiting ourselves to like a single point of view, it really, what's happening is it condenses a lot of the really, really important conversation to October and November, which I'm not really sure benefits everybody strategically. So just some things to think about.
Brittany, hold on, sorry, John.
Director Santa has her hand raised.
Thank you. There you go.
I wanted to go back to the survey, but I didn't want to lose Lisa's train of thought. So if you want to close that out and then we can go back to member survey, that's fine.
She said you're good. Go ahead, Director Santa.
Okay, thanks. You're so gracious. I just wanted to, on the survey part, to just validate or just present a recommended timeline. Surveys, typically, if no board members and no other committees are going to be involved, to Jennifer's point, does take 12 weeks. Usually that's a discovery period. You align across multiple stakeholders and there's actual like survey architecture. Then there's the drafting. And then there's a piloting where you test the actual functionality of the tool that you're using. And then there's an actual launch. With all that said, knowing that I think fiscal might be interested in getting data, PRAC, the board, I can't see this being a 12-week project timeline like it's typically done. It's going to be much longer. And for that reason, I was one of the people that had pushed for FY27 funding for that sole purpose alone. So I just wanted to present that point of view. Thank you.
I'm not at all comfortable drafting a budget that sets an artificial dollar limit or percentage limit. We're a member service organization. Tell me what the services are that the members want. We know that answer. We have a survey. And so rather than set this artificial limit, I mean, we have an artificial limit. It's in the deed. It sets how high our assessments can go. It's there. I'm not proposing coming anywhere near that number, but it is, we have that number. To me, in a member service organization that isn't looking to make a profit, which we're not, the first question is, what services does our membership want? We know that answer. We have the survey. What will that cost? And then peel back from there to say, okay, if we want a lower assessment, we got to cut these services and see how far that plays. I don't think it'll play very well, but it seems to me conceptually that's how we approach a budget in a non-for-profit customer service organization. And so I think that's how we've been doing it the last couple of years. And then we get down to the end and go, oh my God, that assessment's higher than we want. But I think that concept is what serves our membership the best.
Just to add on, can I add on to that?
Go ahead, Director Santa, and then you're next.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that the member survey can be used to collect data about the membership, which we don't actually have much information on besides where you live, how much you pay, but like we don't know what the household makeup is. And I believe several times on past cycles, folks have said there's an interest in having somewhat of stakeholder census data, if you will. Let's just call it for that. And I think that tool can be applied at this time where you can stretch the dollars, not just asking our members satisfied with tennis, pool, asking about pickleball. Sentiment does change. Populations are shifting. The community is aging. So there is an opportunity to just expand beyond what John Farrell's speaking of.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what we have to really consider is that over 50% of our expenses are in payroll and headcount. So, you know, you've got inflation, you've got raises, you've got benefits and all that. And I don't know, Ed, what you think, but with respect to that, there's, you know, it's going to go up by probably more than inflation. And you've mentioned you're not even going to try to adjust headcount. So I think if you need to think about the budget, you need to be thinking about the fact that, you know, over 50% or more is already headcount. And if you know, you got to control expenses, you're going to have to be talking about what does that mean? And, you know, I think what Peter's talked about, looking at efficiencies, that's very important.
Okay, Bob? Sorry.
I have another, I would suggest another approach, which is, although it may be implicit, very explicitly state that the starting point will be what it costs to run the business as is. From there, then you can start to make judgments about increasing or decreasing, but if you don't know the starting point, it's just a guess. And I know that Ed and Pete have done a lot of that work already.
Yeah.
But that's going to avoid, you at least know if all these things play out, this is what the assessment will be. It shouldn't be the starting point. We're only willing to increase the assessment by 5% or nothing. That's not the way to, what does it cost? What are we going to do? What's it going to cost to run the operation? Then we can start blue sky.
Yeah, and just to clarify my comment, agree with everything everyone has said. I am just saying that a lot of the cut decisions are made very late in the process because there is a cap. There is a complete unwillingness of the board to raise the assessment, even 10%, unless there was some kind of catastrophic situation, which I can respect. I mean, that I've heard enough of these conversations to understand that. Like, that is one of the missions of this board, is to keep the assessment at a certain level. So then the way that the organization also has to evolve to meet the needs of the community. If we were to have a budget conversation, and say that advocacy, we need to have a lot of advocacy about the golf course next year, possibly. Maybe that should cost $150,000, $200,000. I'm making up numbers, I don't know. But then it's a question of, okay, if that's gonna cost that amount of money, that would be $10, right? It's $5 is ish, 100K, right? So $5 is 100K. So you're looking at, okay, what in the board has, this is the strategic priorities. They want to right side these things. And at the same time, they also do want to keep the assessment within a certain range. That range is a lot lower than the legal range. And I think that is worthy of presenting a view in draft 1 and sticking to the strategic initiatives and have that conversation play out over months rather than 11 p.m. on a November evening. That was my comment on it. Is just kind of balancing those strategic priorities in a changing organization over time. Let those things play out correctly.
So, go ahead.
Mr. Severs has his hand raised.
I can't see that. Who is it?
Scott Severs.
Scott, go ahead.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that are being made, and trying to keep both, the capital plan, the budget for next year as the sole focus. With that in mind, because of where some of these assets are, and in particular, just also the framework of this is a homeowners association, so we Dave's point early on of we have to preserve the assets of the members, right? So property values, and then John Farrell's point about the trees and everything. I would encourage that long range planning of what to do with some of those things, because a property that has a tree split the house in half is not exactly preserving the value of that property. Yes, there's insurance, but there are human costs that need to be considered as well. So it's not just what's on RA property, but it's how it gets impacted and adjusted as it buttresses other homeowners' properties. Not to mention that there's North Reston, which a majority of the power lines are underground. South Reston, they're above ground, which causes a lot of other issues. So I know there's a lot of different things to think through, not necessarily for the conversation as it sits tonight, but it's really important for the board to hear that there has to be other things that need to be thought of, and trying to be creative with it, because With all the trees, if they're all 60 years old and they all have these life expectancies between 60 and whatever 100 years, there's already the fungus that's been ripping through a lot of the oaks and other trees. They're hazards potentially for residents. So as we think about other capital planning, we have to think about the cost from a different perspective. I know it's everyone's only looking at RA specific, but that's the impact, and that's what really drives. You're not going to see that in a survey, right? But that's the type of thing that will impact it. I mean, at this point, one tree costs $4,000 to be taken down. That's if you're in a cluster and you're splitting that among 65 people, houses, that's not a big deal. If you're a hairy homeowner down the street and you have to cut a check for $4,000, that matters a lot. That matters even more if that tree is actually an RA tree, but it's maybe partially on the line of their home. They're like, nope, we're not going to touch it. So trying to think through of how we get through the next year, but then also the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So just trying to balance those things out. So that's the only thought I have on as we go through this process. Yes, let's focus on 2027. Focus too on how we need to integrate with all of the other committees. It's not going to be something that can be decided anytime soon. I haven't heard a lot of discussion about that. It's not something that doesn't really come up a lot on the finance committee, but it probably should. I know it's more adjacent, but it is a factor that could be looming larger down the road.
Thank you. I also, I'll get to you next. I just wanted to point out, because I think at least 3 of us were on the board at that time, maybe 4. In 2024, the assessment raised 7.1%. And I will remind everyone that at that time, that assessment raised 7.1% because we were actually bringing the budget up to the spend. We had artificially lowered the budget so many years that that's what it took just to get to the actual spend. So I appreciate many things. I think like all of us, we hear the people of don't raise our rates. And while I appreciate everyone's opinion on that, I will state something that I've stated many times before. RA has not been immune to budget increases, right? Like, it's not like the gas company went, ooh, you're RA, you don't have to pay us extra, ooh. Like, it doesn't work that way. So I think in general, when we are looking at the budget, whether it's draft 1 or draft 2, we need to be cognizant of, like Bob said, what does it actually cost to run this business? And the reality is every year we see our member comments and we go, wow, that's a great idea. That looks good, cool. And we throw it all in there. And then every year everyone goes, whoa, we can't spend that much money, right? And that's the normal flow of things. So I think that in general, to have here's what it's going to cost you just to run everything as it is today, nothing new, nothing different, nothing extra, and then provide those options, like you were saying, provide us. And I think you've heard that from us time and time again. I have no doubt that that's what you guys are working towards. I think we saw some of that last year when you kind of recognized that's how things were going. So I have no doubt there'll be improvement, but I just want to recognize that 7.1% in 2024 was because we were making up for shortfalls from the years prior. Actually, give me 1 second.
Yep.
I have 2 quick questions, simple questions. Who designs the survey? And then can members choose or vote for artificially keeping the assessment low or stable?
So who designs the survey is a great question. Many people have many different comments on the survey. The last time the survey was done, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee had a huge hand in what was asked in the survey. The board also helped guide that process. If we were to go down this road again, I'm sure that would be a similar process. I'm sorry, your second question was, can the members vote to keep the assessment low? Was that
Yeah,
the
do we have
question?
any feedback, like as part of the survey, whether the
So,
assessment is low or high? and
This,
gonna keep it?
this, yeah, so the survey that was done was specific to recreational amenities, so the
But no, we
assessment.
asked we had a question about assessment.
There
We
was
had
a question.
couple of questions about assessment.
The survey was not specific to should the assessment be kept low or not. There were questions about should RA invest in certain amenities and how would that affect the assessment. We do every year through the member budget suggestions process, get lots of comments about maintaining the assessment level. And that's true again this year. There's 7 or 8 related to that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Please.
You know, so far, I think this has been a great conversation, and I just want to, say thanks to everybody on the Finance Committee. We've had some of these conversations in the committee meetings, and they're coming into here, so I appreciate everybody contributing. One thing we've been talking about are the values of our assessment dollars. And I think Lisa, in her comments, hinted on, I think we owe it to our memberships to do more than just keep the lights on, to just keep things functioning. We need to modernize over time. We need to enhance over time. We need to add value. We need to bring standards up to where we're, to current day or keep pace with current day. And some of that is through assessments, certainly, but then there's also non-assessment revenues that we need to consider. So I'd like part of the conversation to also talk about how do we bring in non-assessment revenues. And certainly there's been a lot of work on the fee pyramid. There's been a lot of work on programming. I know we've had the Pass to Play program, trying to bring in maybe some TSA residents. I think that needs to be an ongoing strategic conversation for the board to continue to have to bring in more revenues. So that's just my piece.
Go ahead, John.
I do have to share with my fellow board members, maybe I'm in an entirely different bubble from the rest of you. I never hear anybody complain about the assessment.
Stop by my trash can and you'll hear it,
That's
because that's where I heard it this
perfectly
week.
fine. But I'll go back to it again. I never hear anybody complain to me about the assessment. They'll complain to me about the lack of pool hours. They'll complain to me about the condition of a trail. They'll complain to me about a bridge that needs attention. I never get a complaint about the size of our assessment. And so, yeah, we're getting 12 people out of 24,000 homes. Are we getting 12 complaints about the assessment in the budget? Yeah, big surprise. When I get 6,000 complaints about the assessment, then I'll start to worry. There will always be people who resent getting an assessment bill because they resent living in Reston, they resent our covenants, and they only bought here because this was the cheapest house they could find. They're not, they don't use the pools, they don't use the trails, and they don't want us to make any assessments. But I'm not driven by them in my budget decisions. I'm driven by the people who appreciate the assessment, the services that we provide, the facilities that we provide. And everything I hear is they're more than happy to pay the assessment if the quality of services is maintained. And we spent a whole lot of time before I was on the board and before others were on the board trying to find non-assessment revenue. And we wound up coming up with Rube Goldberg schemes that cost us more money than we realized. I think it's a unicorn, but somebody wants to spend their time trying to find that unicorn, God bless.
Director Santa, I do see you. Give me one moment, please. Go ahead.
One thing I think that's really important is we're talking about kind of the status quo, and I think, Ed, you mentioned in your presentation about the advocacy revenue. I will tell you that I found out last night that Reston National, the owners, are starting to do surveys in the anticipation that they're going to get zoning. And that, while Reston National is not part of RA, it does impact the property values associated with all the clusters around it. Mm-hmm. And I think that the $60,000 that you said was spent on no casino, as far as I'm concerned, that's a dead issue, at least till the next legislative session. But for 2027, I think, there's going to be a real fight over maintaining the green space for the golf courses. And, I was surprised last night to hear that the owners are out there with stakes, and I think if you go over and look at Reston National, they got flags where, hey, this is where we're going to build our stacked condos. So I think it's really important that, we go beyond thinking about the status quo ante and then, what's going to happen with respect to the future. And $60,000 isn't going to cut it. If you have to go to Fairfax County and put in amicus briefs in the courts and all that. So anyway, I just, an idea you need to think about, that the status quo is not really going to be, the casinos, because that's dead for a while. And I think you need to be thinking about how do you protect the property values associated around the golf courses. And I know that's not Reston land, but, building the condos impacts all the clusters around it.
Creek is.
Okay.
Yeah, Hidden Creek.
Bob, I know you had something to say, and then I want to get to Director Santa.
No, it's
You're good?
just, yeah.
Okay.
Hidden Creek.
You can go, Bob. You can go.
Hidden Creek is coveted property. Reston National is not.
And just a reminder to our members who are unaware, Hidden Creek is a private golf club and Reston National is a public golf course. Just as a reminder to those who may not be familiar.
And I wish I was as stupid as the people that bought Reston National as a golf course for 5 times its value.
Well,
I wish I was
they do that often in other places. Go ahead, Director Santa.
I just wanted to react again, just because I do think that we are a member-driven organization, and as such, the more we can ask of our membership regarding just establishing KPIs on satisfaction. So I understand that some board members have heard different things, but I think a survey will provide greater clarity on what should be prioritized. Decide future budgeting, programming, facility investments, etc. So I just would be remiss if these points are not made, and I felt obligated to make those as such. But I did want to ask a bigger point, which is we're having a very thoughtful conversation tonight. I guess my question to my fellow board members, fiscal committee members, and staff is, how are we going to move forward with all of our differentiating viewpoints, or what is the sequences to getting us to some type of consensus on how to move forward?
Ed,
Because, because this feels to me right now like a member survey in real time.
Ed, do you have some thoughts on your plans for moving us forward?
Well, I'm taking notes, and I'm sure Pete and I will discuss, and we kind of have some ideas already of what we're going to want to build into the draft budget, and we'll continue to work with the board and finance committee. I mean, the member budget suggestions will be part of that process, but we'll continue to communicate with you. As a reminder, this year we're only really doing 2 drafts of the budget, which kind of means only 1 draft budget, because the last draft is meant to be the final. But as kind of a compromise, we are going to do a finance draft version earlier, so that there's at least a little bit of a look. At least the finance committee can look at it, and board members and the public would be available. It would be available to anybody who wanted to look. So, we'll be working it over the coming months and continue to take feedback. But I'm, jotting notes, and I think we have a pretty good idea what we'll want to do. But there's certain things like advocacy that we're going to need, really a board decision on what they'd like to do with that. So.
Okay. Director Jessup, go ahead. And then I wanted to give staff at least time to finish if they wanted to address capital improvement
I need 7
at
minutes.
all quickly.
I need 7 minutes.
He's got a few slides.
7 minutes, okay.
So under operating budget considerations, I just wanted to comment that I appreciate that staff has talked about this year being a year to look for efficiencies. I think we've had that conversation, and several board members over the years have, requested that be a consideration as part of the budget. So I really appreciate that has been included in something that you're thinking about. But I also think, on the flip side of that, when you're talking about changing back-end infrastructure like IT and software, right, those two things go together. So anything that you can do to present a picture of, we are looking to adopt this efficiency, it is going to cost us X number of dollars to put in new whatever, but eventually, right, our ROI is going to be Saul in 3 years, 5 years, however long that is. I think that will go a long way to helping the board and the membership understand the value of an investment that's going to create efficiencies down the road, and speaks to kind of Lisa's point of, could we have an online process for many of the things that we do?
And ROI can be qualitative. It's
Sure.
not just
Mhm.
quantitative. I think people get that confused. They think, I'm gonna invest in technology and it's gonna save all this money. In an organization this size, that's generally never true. Like, it might save a little bit of money, but you might get a better service, a better value to the membership. You may be able to take that little bit of money and redirect it someplace else. But in an organization that is the size at 20 million, technology adoption is just about moving forward and how you serve the membership. It's not about this huge pot of money that's gonna cause savings. Like,
Yes, I
ROI
agree.
could be qualitative.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay. Just wanna
And
make sure everybody understands
And just as a
that.
reminder, as we continue forward with the technology, which I'm all for, please do not lose sight of member services in that, because we do have people in our community that, for whatever reason, technology is not easily accessible.
Sure.
And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are here for all members, not just the members that have access to the technology.
Good point.
My second point was, to me, the survey that we did in 2023 was a facility survey. It wasn't a programming survey. We did ask, 3 questions or something at the beginning about how do you, based on the assessment today, what do you perceive the value? What I do know is 16% of the people that filled out the survey said that they thought it was a poor or no value, which, if you equate that to 16% of our households, that's about 3,500 households and certainly more than 6,000 people. So that has been in my mind as the years have passed in us adopting a budget. What I think that we have done to help us figure out if the services side, which is more the operational side, is of value to our members without doing a formal survey at this point, is the fee pyramid. And so it will come to no surprise to Mr. Lusk that I very much am looking forward into the analysis that goes into the fee pyramid, because to me, it's the only thing we have right now to tell us, are the services that we're offering, are the programs that we're offering of value to the members, or are they not valuable to the members, and should we consider doing something else with them? Until we get to a new survey, I think that that's what we have to rely on. I think on the board side, I said it earlier, but I think we owe the membership and staff a decision on advocacy. We need to figure out, to some of the points that have even been made tonight about the golf course, we need to figure out what our definition of advocacy is, how far we're willing to support it, and then put some type of dollars behind that. And then the other thing I think that is incumbent upon the board is to figure out where the Friends of Reston plays with our budget. You heard Ed earlier. I made a motion. We earmark $70,000 next year for, but we need to figure out what is their role in supporting the association. What do we want to ask of them? And I think that is really important for the board to consider, so that we can give our president and our CEO kind of that walking the talk when they go to the 4 meetings to figure out what are they doing to support the organization, because we hear all the time when they come to see us that they want to be of value to the community, right? And we need to help them elevate that stature so that the members know that they're of value, and that is incumbent then on us to make a decision on how they can be the most valuable to us. So I'd like to see those two things decided by the board at a future meeting. Thanks.
Just quickly on Friends, so the Friends of Reston has changed their own budget development process to match ours, which I think was a great move on their part. So we are planning to go to them in early July, I think, and say, hey, here's some of the things that we're thinking about from an RA perspective, just to get their feedback. But I agree with everything Director Jeschak was saying. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on Director Santa's where do we go from here kind of thing. How do we herd the cats? And just a quick one. You know, this is why at a meeting like this, if the board, I know it's a big if, you know, thought that here's where we want assessment growth to be, knowing that ahead of time rather than knowing it in October when you see a draft is very helpful to staff in putting together. And in fact, Director Jeschak commented on some other things that advocacy, you know, if you know, the earlier you know those things, the more we get them into early drafts and early reviews, so that when you see something, you know, it's closer to where your heads are at than I think in the past, where we kind of wait until you see the first set of numbers and then start going through. Member suggestions are going to come up with all kinds of wonderful ideas. I would suggest right now that that capital funding number that's in the 27 budget today can't go down much. I'm exaggerating the word much.
No, I
It
understand.
probably needs to go up, but I'm just saying, there are just some things that I think that are in place, but anything the board can put out ahead of time on their thoughts of where directionally they want things to be would help in herding those things for the first draft.
So, go ahead.
And not everything is essential. And so I really think there needs to be probably, I know it comes up like throughout the year, but there's a difference between essential, which probably advocacy might be at that level, versus nice to have, which might be like a new book box, you know, by like Autobot, I don't know. But like really ranking and filing essential and essential versus nice to have. And then also, when providing direction to management, the board can take a strategic approach. Showed me what like a Cadillac advocacy plan looks like versus do me, you know, a little bit step up from where we are and let management do the homework to come up and interview that different types of advocacy services and firms that they're up there and come back with some range of outcomes. Like I think that is because when you talk in range of outcomes, the value proposition actually pops out and becomes a lot more obvious than when you're like, what could I get for 100,000 or what could I get for 75,000?
Thank you. If it's okay, if you recall, I have a hard stop in 10 minutes. So I would really like to hear staff's presentation on capital improvement plan before I have to walk out the door.
30 seconds. Casino's coming back next session.
It wasn't. And I'll take the rest of his 30 seconds to remind our staff, our committees, and our members that if you look at other pool passes, HOAs, we are not poorly priced by any means for what we offer to our members. And while I appreciate that those people who owe $800 in condo or cluster fees every month, the $800 we charge hurts them, I highly recommend seeing if you can lower your cluster or condominium fees.
Gee, thanks.
Mr. Lutz?
All right, let's bring it home. This has been a great conversation, so I'll try to bring it home here with the CIP. So when I was thinking about the CIP and getting ready for 2027, I think it's a really good idea for us to just think about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. I know this is very boring, but I'm going to work through it and it will make sense at the end, I promise. So in 2024, we did our reserve study as we're required to do. Everyone will remember it was a really great, fun time. It wasn't discussed or debated at all. And So we made it through 2024. In 2025, it was suggested that we try to find a different way to look at the condition of our assets. We did our first round of condition assessments. Everyone seemed to respond positively. We did some more, we did some more, we did some more. In 2025, we then had conversations with our capital working group, many of which are in this room tonight, to talk about funding. The board and the finance committee will remember that we had many different funding models that were discussed and debated, and we really landed on the flat funding model as our model of choice due to the consistency of the assessment year over year. So now, with our 10-year CIP, we're moving into our facilities master plan phase, which to me is the fun, exciting part. So if you look at the bottom of the slide, you can see, we know what we own, we know what condition it's in, we know how to maintain it, so now what's our future? And I know that this has been a hot topic at the Finance Committee every month for at least 6 months, and I appreciate that conversation, and we're working our way there. So I thought it was just helpful to provide just some detail on where we are with the CIP because it's come a long way over the past few years. Next slide, please. So where are we now? I came into 2026 with the goal of execution of the CIP. Mr. Kerr mentioned earlier we had some delays last year, various reasons for those. But if you look at some major carry forward projects from 25, including Lake Road dredging, the Hook Road ball field, the huge repair at Lake Newport, and then the playgrounds were a big carry forward number. We are working our way through that carry forward list, which is a huge accomplishment for the team. And then just some status reports on where we are. We have 19 projects scheduled, there are 33 in progress and 22 completed. We actually have 2 footbridges that have been on the CIP since 22, before I worked here, that will be completed this year. So we are working our way through that backlog, making some progress as the year goes on. Next slide, please. So again, where are we? One of the things I'm most proud about in the CIP are our recurring funding programs, like our Trails and Pathways program, our Culverts program. Again, I'm the only person that's excited about the Culverts program, but I think it's very important. And then our pools replacement furniture program. So to me, this is a sign of a mature capital improvement plan. Not every dollar is tied to a specific one thing, but we know that we can trust the team, trust the staff to go out and execute on behalf of the board based on the funding for these recurring programs. So I think it's just important to point out we're moving in the right direction in a lot of these things. Next slide, please. All right, so where we're going. Major considerations in the CIP for next year are here on the slide. I do not anticipate many different additions or subtractions to the 27 funding year in the CIP, but just to cover these very quickly, as part of the Hook Road Working Group many years ago, there was a permanent restroom that was recommended. Staff got an initial quote on this project last year. The quote was not favorable, so we're coming back with a different option for the 27 budget, excuse me. Lake Newport Tennis is in full swing. We just saw the final design this week. We're looking forward to having a community meeting. I think it's going to be the end of July to kind of bring that all home. That will then come back to the board as part of our facilities investment process for final review before a contract. Something new that will come up this fall, we're working through it now, is fire suppression for Brown's Chapel inside of the chapel. So as part of summer camp licensing, they've been very clear to us that when they come back for licensing for 27, we will need to have fire suppression in the chapel. So we're going to get a design, we'll figure it out, talk it through, and bring it back to the board for discussion. And then another engagement that started last summer is the Lake Thoreau Observation Dock. We saw the final design of this very recently as well, and we will be coming back to that community for that conversation so the board can see the results of that engagement again this fall as well. So lots to consider for 27. I know this doesn't look like a lot, but it really is a lot for our team at the moment. So that's what we're looking for in 27. Next slide, please. Again, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but we did in the current capital improvement plan, break out our condition assessment program by year. There may be some additions, subtractions, puts and takes, as Ed would put it, for 2027, but I think generally this is where we'll be. We'll continue tracking our condition assessment program completion rate as a KPI because I think this is a great payoff for the association to see the investment in condition assessments and then the back end completion of remedying that issue on behalf of the association. Next slide. Thank you, Matt. Okay, so where we're going. Touched on this earlier. This is our plan. The board is discussing the facilities master plan tomorrow at our board meeting. We have engaged with our vendor. We're beginning to work on the project. Again, but this is about the future. This is not a maintenance plan. This is not looking at the condition, but how we make decisions moving forward for new amenities and how we prioritize those. Next slide, please.
Is that new and replacing or just strictly new?
It's a good question. Without going too far into detail, I think what the plan will help us do is make those decisions.
Okay.
So should we replace it? Should we try something new? How do we get there? But that's a great question. Okay, my last soliloquy for this evening. This is now the third time you've seen this table in this presentation. This is not the last time, what's that? Thank you. This is not the last time you will see it this year, I guarantee that. I wanted to point out in that bottom table that's outlined in red, and I apologize to my finance friends, you heard me give this speech last week. We've had many, many, many conversations about capital funding in the last year, and more specifically in the last 6 months. This really comes down to, in my opinion, how does the money collected from our membership that is then spent by the staff affect that bottom line capital reserve? That is, to me, the crux of the conversation, as easy as we can make it. It's oversimplified, I know. I can see Mr. Kerr looking at me. But as we're talking about this from a board perspective, if we follow the plan that we've laid out that you see here, and in 2030, if we follow and do everything that we say we're going to do, contribute and spend the way we say we are, we end up with 100% years spent in reserve, if we choose to only do what we've already said we're going to do. So when this comes back to the board in the form of a resolution, I think we're very, very close to where we want to be. I know there's differing opinions. I've talked to many board members on how much should be in reserve. Great, we can have that conversation. But if you're, online tonight or you're here in this room, I would really take the time to review what this says and understand it, because this is the crux of the conversation. And I give Ed and Bob and Dave a ton of credit for all the work they've put into this. I'm just taking credit for it as I'm sitting here now. But I would really take some time to look at this and understand it as part of that Resolution 3 capital funding conversation. Okay. Next slide, please. Only because we've had many, many, many conversations about bathhouses. We do have some bathhouse renovations in the CIP. This was new last year when we put the 10-year CIP plan together. A lot of the staff collaborated and really wanted to push this as something new. It is currently scheduled for out years. So maybe a consideration from a staff perspective might be pushing this up a year or two, but just something to consider. And I think that brings us home. Next slide. Yep. So then just from a budget timeline perspective, again, we're discussing member budget suggestions on June 11th. We'll then come back at the end of July and get direction from the board regarding which ones to include in the budget. And then the finance draft budget will be released in early September to the finance committee, and the board will first review the budget in October. Any questions on capital?
I did have a question. Can you go back a slide or two? We're talking about bathhouses. There. There. I know, because I've lived here forever, that we rebuilt the Glade pool, but when was that?
I'd have to look at it. I don't know the answer.
I think it's 2014. And do we know whether or not we rebuilt the bathhouse as part of the 2014? Because I'm just trying to get a sense of, how often are you looking at rebuilding a bathhouse?
Sure, and I think it's important too that what we've proposed here is to really clean up the interior.
Right.
So where all of this came from was in the condition assessments. These were all spread out over many years. So we took all of that and said, why don't we take something spread out over 3 years instead of because what we have done in the past is we'll replace sinks and then shower heads and something over 4 or 5 years. Why don't we renovate the interior of a bathhouse? And instead of having to worry about perhaps PRC plans or other things, this is just a facelift from the interior.
No, I understand. What I was just trying to get a handle on is if in fact we redid the bathhouse in 2014 and we're saying redo it again in 2029, are we saying that a bathhouse is a 15-year lifespan? That's what I'm trying to get to, because I know we added the slide and we added a couple of other features to Glade. And I remember my family being all excited to go there when it was reopened. So I'm just trying to get a handle on.
I can get you that answer.
What's the life cycle of the work that we've already done once? And we've redone somebody can correct me, I want to say 5 or 6, Laura's not here, but we've redone 5 or 6 of our pools already. And with major renovations, Thoreau obviously, but others, and trying to get a handle on what's the,
Well,
Lights
I know we did Shadowwood recently, but there were even pieces within Shadowwood that were not able to be done because of the footprint of the building.
Right.
And so I think that's a piece of what we're looking at here of, yes, it may have been done in 2014, but maybe it wasn't done to the best of our ability, and
What
we're
does-
trying to adjust for that.
and the PRC amendment clarified that for us to some degree. We are going to
Right,
be able to do about
because-
2,000 square feet.
I know that Shadowwood is
But-
just barely handicap
But
accessible.
what does done mean, I think is the question, right? What is done? What does that mean? And I think we're
Right.
trying to answer that now.
And trying to get a handle on what life cycle is.
And Glade was done way before 2014. Yeah, I've been here since.
Glade has not been shut down since before 2010.
Yeah, I think we're separating the pool from the bathhouse
Right.
as two separate
Right.
things.
That's right.
I'll make sure we have
You
the
run the
information.
pool without the
I'll
bathhouse?
dig it up.
No, but the renovations of each.
No, I'm just saying, the pool has been running since before 2010, every year. So,
I understand, we didn't shut it down to redo it, but I do remember quite vividly,
The design has
redone.
never changed in 20 years. so-
I'm sorry?
The design has never changed in 20 years, so.
Right.
Glade present-
Bob, did you have a
Glade
comment?
presents a particular a unique problem in that it's a two-story building that the second story is used for multiple functions.
Yep.
Which presents a different challenge than all the others.
Right.
I'm sure there's more conversation potentially to be had, but I need to hand over my duties because I do have to unfortunately leave this discussion at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, great job, Margaret.
Do we want to take a recess or are we about to roll it up?
We're about to wrap it up.
That's fine.
Yeah. I think we've had a very good conversation. I appreciate everybody's participation tonight. Thank you very much. The next section of this is new business. Does anybody from the board have new business?
We need to exit the committee of the whole.
Yeah, we need to exit the committee of the whole.
Motion to-
Consent to exit committee of the whole and return to regular order.
Any objection?
It might
I
put
see
it on.
none online.
It was.
Go ahead, say it again.
Yeah, I ask the unanimous consent to resolve out of committee of the whole status and return to regular order.
Any objection from the remote folks? Hearing none, okay. Director Juszczyk, you had new business, I think.
I would like unanimous consent from the board to ask our president and acting CEO to find an appropriate time on a future board meeting to add a discussion of budget matters that are not member suggestions. Examples being the ones I gave tonight on advocacy and FOR. There might be others that board members want to fit into that as well. But if you guys could do, an appropriate time that would fit with staff's budget schedule.
Pete, I think we have that.
Any
Good. Yeah.
objection from the board?
No.
That's all.
All right, then, I adjourn. Thank you very much.